fished here before, and this is where we caught the first shot of the day that we didn't get on camera. Yes! Hey y'all, we're back. Welcome to Rudy Flies. So, as y'all saw in the last one of these videos, we talked about rod selection. And I will put a card up here to last week's video in the description below. But basically, in today's video, we're going to be talking about flies. So, okay. You know, most people know what lures are, but most people don't know what flies are. So I'm gonna get into that in just a second. So, again, if you have not seen last week's video, go watch it. I would highly recommend you go watch last week's video if you have not seen it. But if you have, again, this week we're going to be talking about fly selection. So, So, like I was saying, we're going to be talking about flies. This is my fly box. This is an untraditional fly box. Most fly boxes don't look like this. This one's just really cool looking. So, before we open this, we're going to get into the 4 different types of flies. Alright, so the 4 types of flies that you're going to be using on a fly rod, one of these, are dry flies. I'll put a picture of each of them. So, there's dry flies. Then you have nymphs. Nymphs is the second most popular. Then you have streamers. And then the final one is wet flies. And wet flies and nymphs are kind of the same thing. But most of the time, when you're a beginner, you're either going to be using dry flies, nymphs, or streamers. You're really not going to be diving into the world of wet flies. Because they're a mix between a dry fly and a nymph. They're weird, but... So, I'm going to show y'all examples, and then we're going to say when to use. I'm going to tell you what each does, and then I'm going to show y'all examples. So, if we open my fly box here, I really love this fly box, by the way. I will put in the link in the description below where you can get this. But, here's a dry fly. Here's my fly box, by the way, if y'all have never seen it. This is a dry fly. This big old buggy thing. As you can see, it has a bunch of like feathers and fur sticking out of it, and that helps it float. It also has legs. So what this does is when you cast it, it lands on top of the water and it floats. And it floats down the current, and then when a fish hits it, it goes under. Kind of like a bobber, if you've ever fished. And here is an example of a smaller fly. And this is called an elk hair caddis. But it's basically the same thing, it's just smaller. Yeah. Now, let's get on to the next fly. So, the next fly we're going to be talking about is streamers. I know that streamers can be really weird, but streamers are meant to resemble bait fish. And so, if you've done regular fishing, you can think of a streamer as one of those spinner baits, like the minnows, like the little minnow-looking things with the little minnow-looking things, or crawfish, that sort of stuff. Those are streamers, and they either come in. They don't get really tiny. That's probably about as small as a streamer you're gonna find, and you have ones this big for like saltwater, big giant fish. So, when to use a streamer. So, basically, a streamer, you would use it in kind of like the winter time if you want to resemble bait fish. Now, the advantage to a streamer is that they sink. Dry flies do not sink. A streamer gets down into the water, and in a later video, I'll talk about water columns. But basically, if this is the surface of the water, your dry fly is going to be right here. But your streamer can be anywhere from here all the way down to the bottom. And yeah, that's basically what a streamer is used for. So let me get on to an example. So here is a really popular streamer. This is called a woolly bugger. It's one of the most popular streamers, and for good reason. They work. They catch fish. The wind's kind of bad right now. That's why it's angled like that. But basically, when this is in the water, it looks like a little bait fish, right? So if you can imagine this when it's wet, these feathers are gonna stick down. This is gonna like tame out. It's gonna look like that in the water, and it's just gonna, and these little flashy parts, that's what looks like a fish scales. And these work really well, again, to resemble bait fish. Here's a smaller example. This is just a smaller woolly bugger, but it's basically the same thing. So, yeah. Now on to nymphs. So, here is a nymph that looks like an egg. It's very good for stocked fish and hatchery rates because it's basically what they eat. It works well for trout in the springtime. So that's an egg. And then I do not have a squirmy worm in here, unfortunately. Squirmy worms work amazingly. I know there's a lot of controversy on them, but you can't admit that they don't work, because they do. Alright, sorry, my voice is kind of squeaky today. So here is a nymph on the bigger side. So that's what they look like. That's on the bigger side. Let me find a smaller one real quick. So here is a smaller nymph, right? And this is basically going to resemble basically every little tiny insect that floats in the water. So, yeah. If you can imagine, if you're a fish and you see this float by, you'd strike it. So, yeah, that's nymphs. Now, let's go to an overview. So, alright. Those are the three main types of flies that you're going to be using when you're just first starting out. And fly selection is not as important as, well, no, I should say this. Fly selection is more important than have your rod selection. Yes, your rod selection is important, but at the same time, you do need a good rod. I mean, if you don't have the right fly, you're not going to really catch fish. But and there are some flies that if you don't need a ton of flies. If we look in this fly box here, I have a lot because I tie my own and I've been fishing for a while. So I have a lot of flies. And this isn't my only fly. I have 3 fly boxes. But you don't need this many flies. If you have 2 streamers and 2 dry flies and 2 nymphs, and you'll be perfectly fine. And you can catch fish with that. It's just people like to have a lot of flies. But you really don't need that. But fly selection is one of the most important things when it comes to fishing, because that dictates whether you're going to catch fish or not. Now, again, in the next video, we're going to be talking about leaders. And leaders are kind of important, but they're not as important. And I'll get into that next video. But for now, you just need to know that fly selection is the most important thing. Don't worry about the rod, the leaders, the reel, the line. Don't worry about that right now. You just need to worry about the fly selection. That really wraps up today's video. If you guys enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like and comment what you want to see next. The next one of these tutorial videos for beginners is going to be about leaders and tippet and fly line. So that's all coming up next. And we do have a fly fishing trip planned for this weekend. So stay tuned for that. That video will probably get out on Tuesday or Wednesday. So, yep. But as always, good luck and happy fishing.